Lately, I've been looking at the yarn on my shelf, thinking about the projects that I had in mind when I originally bought it, and I've been questioning if I'm still even interested in those projects anymore. I'm just starting to feel disconnected from my yarn, and I was wondering if you're starting to feel the same way. So I came up with 5 tips on how to get reacquainted with your yarn stash and bring back the excitement for what you already have. Remove everything from the stash space. Dust, wipe down, sweep, vacuum, all the things. Before you put anything back, see if you want to do anything else to the space. How about some fresh paint? A new coat of paint in either a calming or energizing color can totally transform the look of a space. Bring in some plants. A couple house plants can bring life to any room. Plus, they're great for air quality. Unless you're like me and you use fake plants because you like the look but lack the green thumb. Or use creative lighting like an LED strip or a unique lamp to create a warm and inviting atmosphere. Good lighting is key for those detailed projects. As you're bringing things back into the space, see if you can put it in a different spot. And if you can't, you have to keep it in the same spot. See if you can rearrange it or reorganize it so that way you're bringing a fresh new look to the space. Reorganizing and rearranging is not limited to your yarn either. You can reorganize your crochet hooks and your notions, maybe by bringing in a new organization tool. Ooh, that sounds fun. Clear some space for an inspiration board. Setting up an inspiration board where you can pin patterns, color palettes, pictures that inspire your next projects. Remember, even the smallest change can bring a big impact. Did you know that yarn can go bad or deteriorate over time, especially if it's stored improperly? Here are some signs to look for. Texture changes. If your yarn has become brittle, stiff, or overly dry, it's probably starting to deteriorate. Good yarn should retain its softness and flexibility. Discoloration, which is the fading or discoloring of the yarn. This can be a result of the age of the yarn or damage from light exposure. Odor. If your yarn is taking on a musty or mildewy smell, that could mean that your yarn was exposed to moisture and could have mold or mildew in the fibers. Unfortunately, it can be quite challenging to salvage a yarn that's been affected by mold or mildew, but here are some things that you can try. Number 1 is assess the damage. Look at the skein and see how much of it was affected by the mold or mildew and see if you can just remove that section. Number 2 is isolate and clean. Only clean the part of the yarn that was affected by the mold or mildew so that way you don't transfer the spores to the unaffected area. Use a mixture of water and mild soap and try not to scrub because scrubbing will further damage the yarn. Once you're sure that the yarn is clean, take it outside underneath the direct sunlight and in the fresh air. The UV light from the sun will kill any of the spores left over from the mold or mildew, and the fresh air will help dry it and breeze anything else away. Then use with caution. The mold or mildew may have damaged the yarn and weakened it, so when you use the yarn in a project, it may not be as strong as it needs to be and might not be the best quality. Insect damage. Check for signs of pests like moths or carpet beetles. These insects like to eat through yarn, leaving holes and thin spots in your yarn. Dealing with yarn that's been affected by bugs can be a bit more challenging, but here are some things that you can try. Number 1 is inspect and isolate. Inspect the yarn. See if it's even worth saving. Bugs eat yarn. They eat holes in yarn. They create thin spots in your yarn. So is it even worth saving? If you think it is, then shake out the yarn, removing any debris, bugs, eggs that might still be in the yarn that you can shake out. Then take the yarn and place it inside a Ziploc bag. Seal the bag and place the bag in the freezer for 48 hours. This should freeze any bugs and eggs that may still be in the fibers. After 48 hours, remove the bag, place it on the counter, let it naturally thaw. The yarn stays in the bag as it thaws. After the yarn has thawed, remove the yarn from the bag, shake again, and any of the dead bugs, dead eggs should just shake loose and be free of your fiber. After this, inspect your yarn once again. Make sure that you really think that it is safe to use, you don't see any thin spots, you don't see any holes in your yarn, and if you're good, then the yarn is free now to use. Dust and dirt. Excessive dust and grime means that the yarn has been stored improperly and it can affect its quality. Yarn that's been affected by dust or dirt can be quite easy to fix. The first thing you can do is just shake it out and see how much dust, dirt you can get off that way. If you still have quite a bit, you can try a brush or even a vacuum to try to suck all of the remaining dust or dirt particles out of the fibers. And if you still see some remaining grime or dirt left on the fibers after that, you can take a wet washcloth to the fiber and just dab. If you had to unwind your yarn to get it fully clean, the next step would just be to re-cake it or re-hank it, and then it's good to go. Remember, proper storage is key to keeping your yarn in good condition. Storing in a cool, dry place, away from direct sunlight and pests, can help prolong its life. So what is the proper way to store or display yarn? Sometimes you want to leave yarn out in the open because you're about to use it in a project, or because it's super pretty and you want it displayed. It's perfectly fine to leave your yarn out in the open as long as it's away from direct sunlight and away from pests. You will also want to dust it often and keep it off of the floor. There are a lot of different ways that you can display your yarn, by color, fiber, yarn label, to name just a few. It's really determined by personal preference and how you want your space to be laid out. However, if you don't plan on using the yarn right away, it is preferred that you put it away in storage. Clear plastic bins are a great way to store your yarn because you can see what's inside of them without having to open them up and dig around. Shoe organizers hang over the back of a door, and each pocket can hold its own individual skein of yarn. Plastic Ziploc bags are a great way to keep your yarn airtight from dust and moisture. Bookshelves can be used as a way to store your yarn and display it by displaying your colorful yarn collection. Totes and baskets are cheap and thrifty. Totes can hold each individual project that you have going on, and baskets can look quite lovely decorated around your home. Pegboards can be placed against a wall and take up a little bit of space. Your yarn can hang from the pegs and look quite visually appealing. Reacquainting yourself with your yarn stash is like rediscovering hidden treasure. By looking at your yarn, you can remember what project you had intended to make when you bought it. Now, you can always change your mind, but by writing down the name of the project that you had wanted to accomplish and the name of the yarn that you are going to pair with it, you are giving that yarn purpose. For even more help, take a picture of the yarn. That way, when you're out and about and you get inspired, you can remember exactly what you have at home. Once you know the yarn you have in your yarn stash, think of a project that inspires you. Can you use any of the yarn you have in your yarn stash to make one of the projects that you really want to make? Test the yarn out, feel it, see if the fibers are compatible with the project, and then also look at the colors. Are the colors of the yarn that you have in your stash still inspiring you? Or have you noticed that the colors that you're drawn to have changed? All things that are really good to know moving forward, and possibly letting go of any materials. Having the inspiration board will also help you tremendously when you're out and about, maybe even buying yarn, so that way you can stay on track and remember the projects that you really want to make and the color palettes that you really want to stick with, that you find most visually appealing. That way you don't find yourself buying yarn just because it's pretty. By reacquainting yourself with your yarn stash, you might find yarn that doesn't inspire you anymore. If yarn is taking up real estate in your stash, it might be time to find it a new home. To de-stash, you can donate your yarn to people who would be thrilled to receive it. Some examples of locations you can donate to are local schools or community centers, senior centers, charity organizations, libraries, Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, local yarn stores. It might be a really good idea to call ahead of time before you donate any yarn to see if they are even accepting yarn at that time, or if there's anything very specific they are looking for. If you have other yarny friends, you could do something called a yarn swap, where everybody will come together bringing yarn they want to de-stash, and if somebody else's yarn inspires you, you can leave with that yarn. Any yarn that's left over at the end of the night just gets donated. Reconnecting with the yarn in your stash can be a very special experience. It can be nostalgic as you remember where you were, who you were with, when you bought the yarn. It can be inspiring as you remember the project you originally intended to make with the yarn when you bought it. It can be therapeutic as you get lost in the colors and textures and possibilities that the yarn itself holds. Oh my gosh, that part gets me every time. Every year, we should reflect upon the yarn in our stash and how it affects our mental well-being. Let's be in control of our yarny passion and not let our yarny passion be in control of us. I hope you experience so much joy as you rediscover the happiness of reconnecting with the yarn in your stash. And if you have any memories that pop up, I hope you would share them in the comment section below. I would love to hear about your experience going back and reconnecting with the yarn in your stash. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I hope you have the best day, and I will see you in the next one.